The kind of hotel that makes you feel the dress code before you ever read it, sits at the northern edge of downtown Hartford, Connecticut, where old money and new glass have been quietly agreeing with each other for about 60 years. The Aldercroft Grand opened in 1963 and had not stopped reminding people of that fact since. Its lobby floor was the original cream terrazzo, polished twice weekly by a crew that arrived before the breakfast service. The chandeliers above the main sitting area were Venetian, imported, and lit to the precise warmth that made expensive jewelry look its best. The leather chairs near the fireplace were the color of dried tobacco, deep and soft, and the guests who sank into them tended to stay long enough to order 2 drinks. Along the east wall, a long concierge desk of dark walnut gleamed under a row of brass pendants. Behind it, the staff moved with the particular efficiency of people who had been trained to make service look effortless. The Aldercroft Grand did not have a sign that said certain kinds of people were not welcome. It did not need one. Through the revolving door on a Thursday afternoon in late October, walked a man who understood, from the first rotation of the glass, that he was not the kind of guest the lobby had been designed for. Owen Garrity, 34 years old, worked refrigeration and HVAC systems for a commercial contractor out of Bridgeport. His hands had the look of tools used daily. Knuckles thickened slightly. A small scar across the left thumb from a sheet metal edge 2 winters back. He wore a gray canvas jacket over a navy thermal shirt. His work boots were steel-toed and had been wiped down in the parking lot, though the crease lines in the leather gave away how many hours they had already carried him that week. His dark hair was cut short and growing back unevenly, the way hair grows back when a man cuts it himself over a bathroom sink. He held his daughter's hand in his left. Maisie Garrity, 7 years old, walked beside him with her chin up and her eyes moving across the lobby's ceiling the way children look at things they are trying to memorize. She had her father's dark coloring and her late mother's habit of going quiet when a room asked her to be small. Her coat was a dark green quilted thing, bought 2 sizes up so she could grow into it, and she carried a small canvas backpack shaped like a bear against her chest because she felt safer with something to hold. Inside the backpack was a library book about ocean creatures, a pencil case, and a sandwich bag of crackers she had not finished at lunch. Owen had taken half a personal day to bring her here, not because the Aldercroft Grand was their kind of place, but because his own father was somewhere inside it. Russell Garrity, 68 years old, had retired 2 years ago from 41 years of plumbing and pipework. He had a bad hip that he refused to have looked at, and a tendency to take trains instead of asking for rides. Owen had gotten a call that morning from a number he didn't recognize. A woman at the hotel's front desk, telling him that an elderly gentleman by the name of Russell Garrity had been sitting in the lobby for some time, that he appeared to be waiting for someone, and that the staff would appreciate a family member coming to collect him. The woman's tone had been the kind of tone that said more than it said. Owen had not called his father back. He had gotten in the truck. What he found when he pushed through the revolving door was a man he recognized by posture before he could make out the face. Russell Garrity sat in one of the tobacco-colored chairs near the fireplace, not slumped but settled, with the patience of a man who had spent 4 decades waiting for pipes to stop rattling. He wore a brown wool sweater that Owen remembered from childhood, and a pair of slacks that had been ironed carefully, though the crease had softened. His white hair was combed and his hands rested on his knees. He did not look lost. He looked like a man waiting for something he was certain would arrive. He was waiting for Owen's younger sister Colleen, who had called him 3 days ago and told him she had news about the new baby and wanted to celebrate somewhere nice. The Aldercroft Grand was where Colleen had arranged to meet him, because it was where she and her husband always stayed when they came through Hartford. Colleen was 40 minutes late. She had texted Owen, not Russell, to say the highway was bad and to please tell Dad. Russell did not have a working cell phone. He had a phone that received calls only when it felt like it, and it had not felt like it that morning. Owen was crossing the lobby toward the fireplace when he heard the voice. It was not loud. It had the particular quality of voices trained to carry authority in carpeted rooms, precise, controlled, and designed to make the person receiving it feel that the correct response was to comply without spectacle. The voice belonged to a woman named Christine Aldgate, 41 years old, the Aldercroft Grand's lobby manager. She stood about 8 feet from Russell's chair, in a charcoal blazer and dark slacks, her auburn hair pinned back, her posture the posture of someone accustomed to standing in the middle of difficult conversations and not blinking. She was telling Russell that the seating in the lobby's main sitting area was reserved for registered guests and their visitors, and that the hotel had received several comments from guests about the chair having been occupied for an extended period, and that she hoped he understood they had a responsibility to maintain the comfort of their clientele. Russell tilted his head and explained, in the unhurried way of a man who has never seen the point of rushing a sentence, that he was waiting for his daughter, that she had asked to meet him here, and that she was running a little behind on account of traffic. Christine's expression did not change. She told him she understood, and that she was sure that was the case, and that perhaps he would be more comfortable waiting in the hospitality lounge near the entrance, where complimentary coffee was available for walk-in visitors. The hospitality lounge near the entrance was a narrow alcove with 3 chairs, and a table that held a decanter of lukewarm coffee. It was separated from the main lobby by a half-wall of frosted glass. It faced the street and not the fireplace, and it was where the lobby staff directed the people they wanted out of the main sightlines, without technically asking them to leave. Russell looked in the direction Christine gestured. He looked at the alcove. He looked back at Christine. He said he was fine where he was. Maisie, who had been scanning the ceiling moments earlier, had gone still. Her backpack was pressed flat against her chest. She was watching the woman in the charcoal blazer with the attention of a child who does not yet know what is wrong, but has learned to recognize the sound of it. Owen reached the fireplace before Christine could speak again. He touched his father's shoulder first, just briefly, the way you touch someone to let them know the situation has changed. Then he looked at Christine. He asked her if there was a problem. Christine turned, with the smooth pivot of someone who had managed hotel lobbies long enough to shift registers instantly. She offered him the same controlled tone, now calibrated for a person who appeared to be affiliated with the elderly gentleman, and therefore required a slightly more elaborate version of the explanation. She told Owen that the main sitting area was for hotel guests, that his father had been occupying the chair for close to 2 hours, that other guests had made note of it, and that she was simply directing him to an area where he could wait, without causing discomfort to paying visitors. Owen listened to the full thing. Then he asked, evenly, whether his father had caused any disturbance. Christine said that was not quite the issue. He asked whether his father had made any request of the staff. Christine acknowledged that he had not. He asked, in the same level register, what exactly the guests had complained about. The question had an edge to it that was not anger. It was the edge that comes from a very simple observation that has not yet been answered. Christine's rhythm broke slightly, a fraction, just enough to be visible. She straightened and told him that the Aldercroft Grand had an atmosphere to maintain, that their guests expected a certain environment, and that a seated individual who was not a registered guest and who did not match the profile of the hotel's clientele had understandably attracted attention. Owen was quiet for a moment. Maisie pressed one hand lightly against the back of his jacket. He felt it. He turned so that she could see his face, and he made certain his expression was level, and then he looked back at Christine. He told her, without raising his voice, that his father had a name and was wearing a pressed pair of slacks, and was sitting in a chair without bothering a single soul, and that the problem she was describing was not one of conduct. The sitting area had other people in it, a couple in their 50s with a pile of branded shopping bags between their feet, a man in a suit on a laptop near the window, 2 women sharing a plate of small sandwiches on the low table by the east wall. Several of them had looked up during the exchange. Most looked away again quickly, with the practiced disinterest of people who have decided a thing does not require their attention. A bellman near the luggage cart had gone still. He was watching the exchange in the specific way of a person who works in a place long enough to know exactly when its worst habits are showing themselves. A young woman at the check-in desk had stopped typing. Her hands rested on the keyboard and did not move. Christine drew a small breath and made one final attempt. She told Owen she appreciated his understanding, that this was a matter of hotel policy and not personal, and that she would be happy to reserve a table for his family in the dining room once his sister arrived, if he wanted to make a reservation. Owen's father, who had been listening to all of it with the patience of a man who spent a career watching people pretend pipes were fine when they were not, cleared his throat once. He said, mildly, that he had not come to the Aldercroft Grand to sit in an alcove behind a frosted window. He said that his daughter had asked him to meet her here, and that he'd taken the train from New Haven, and that the chair was comfortable, and the fire was warm, and he had not asked anyone for a single thing. He said it the way a man says something that is simply true, without decoration and without apology. Christine's jaw set. She turned toward the main desk and signaled with a brief lift of her hand. A second staff member, a younger man in a matching charcoal blazer whose name tag read Dominic, moved toward the sitting area from the far side of the lobby. His posture had the particular quality of someone walking toward a situation they have not been fully briefed on, but have been signaled to handle. Maisie watched Dominic approach. She had not taken her eyes off the lobby since the moment Christine began speaking. She turned her face upward to her father, not urgently, just quietly. She said she did not understand why the lady wanted Grandpa to move. Owen did not answer immediately. He watched Dominic stop a few feet off and assess the situation with the practiced blankness of a man waiting for instruction. He crouched down to Maisie's level. He told her that some places had rules about who got to sit where, and that sometimes those rules were not really about where a person sat. Maisie absorbed this. She looked at her grandfather in the chair. She looked at the fire. She looked back at Christine. She said in the direct way of a child who has not yet learned to make a conclusion sound like a question, that Grandpa wasn't doing anything wrong. Owen said that was right. Maisie said, a little quieter, that the chair next to Grandpa's was empty. She said they could all sit together and wait for Aunt Colleen and it would be fine. Owen stood back up. He turned to Christine and Dominic and he told them his family would be staying in the sitting area until his sister arrived. He said his name, first and last, and he said his father's name, first and last. He said that if the hotel's policy required them to move, he would like that policy provided to him in writing, so that he could pass it along to his sister, who had arranged the meeting here. He paused. He asked Christine what his sister's name was, and where she typically stayed when she came through Hartford. Christine did not answer. Owen said he would reach out to her directly then. There was a beat. Christine was a woman who was very good at reading lobbies, and what she read now was a man who was not going to get loud, was not going to be rattled, and was not going to move. She also read the bellman at the luggage cart, who had taken 2 small steps in the direction of the sitting area, not toward the Garrity's, but away from the desk, and she read the woman at the check-in counter, who had resumed typing but was doing it with the subdued efficiency of someone who has decided to be somewhere else in her head. Christine said, in a voice that had dropped one precise register, that she hoped they would enjoy their wait. She turned and walked back toward the concierge desk. Dominic followed at the appropriate distance. Owen sat down in the chair beside his father. Maisie climbed into the third chair and unzipped her bare backpack and took out the library book about ocean creatures and opened it to a page she had already dog-eared. Russell looked at his son. He said he had not wanted to cause a fuss. Owen said he knew. Russell said Christine was not a bad person, that people learned to do what the job asked them to do, and after a while they stopped noticing when the job was asking something wrong. Owen said that was probably true. They sat like that for a while. The 3 of them. Maisie turned pages. Russell folded his hands and rested them on his knees, and watched the lobby, the way an old man watches something he has seen enough versions of to understand clearly. Colleen arrived 22 minutes later, with her husband and an apology she delivered, at the speed of someone who had been rehearsing it on the highway. She was 30 years old, and wore the kind of careful coat that said she had made good decisions and wanted them to register. Her husband, whose name was Patrick, carried a soft leather weekend bag, and the demeanor of a man who was accustomed to the Aldercroft Grand, and felt it accordingly. She stopped when she reached the sitting area, and took in the picture. Owen in his canvas jacket, Russell in his brown sweater, Maisie with the ocean book. She said something had happened. Owen said something had tried to happen. Colleen turned toward the concierge desk with the look of a woman who had been coming to this hotel for 4 years, and had a preference on file for the corner suite on the 7th floor. She walked to the desk without being asked. The exchange at the concierge desk lasted less than 5 minutes. It was conducted in lowered voices, though 2 of the phrases were clear enough to carry to the sitting area. The phrase "my father" was one of them. The phrase "4 years" was another. Christine emerged from the back corridor 2 minutes after Colleen's conversation ended. She was accompanied by a man Owen had not seen before, Douglas Hale, 56 years old, the hotel's general manager, a compact man with silver at his temples and the practiced calm of someone who had spent a career walking into situations other people had allowed to develop too far. He wore a tie in the Aldercroft's house color, a deep burgundy, and he carried nothing in his hands. He stopped in front of Russell first. He introduced himself by full name and title. He said that he had been given a brief account of the afternoon, and that he wanted to offer a personal apology, directly, without qualification. He said that the Aldercroft Grand standard for guest treatment did not include asking a visitor to relocate from a public seating area on the basis of appearance, and that what had occurred was a failure of judgment and not a reflection of policy as it was intended. Russell listened with his hands on his knees. He said he accepted the apology, and that he bore no particular ill will, that he had seen enough in 68 years to know how these things happened. Douglas turned to Owen. He spun the same apology and perhaps more. Plus, because Owen had been the one required to stand up and say the obvious thing in a room full of people who had decided not to. Owen said he had only done what seemed right. Douglas said that was exactly the point. He said his staff had received training in hospitality standards twice in the last year, and that neither session had apparently covered what to do when those standards were being quietly violated by the staff themselves. He said that would change, and he said it the way people say things when they mean them, rather than when they want to sound like they mean them. He looked briefly at Maisie, who had closed the ocean book, and was watching him with the direct attention she gave things she was trying to understand. He asked her what she was reading. She told him about the Ocean Creatures book. She told him the vampire squid was her favorite, not because it was the scariest, but because people always thought it was a squid, and actually it was its own separate thing that scientists didn't have a category for yet. Douglas said that was a good reason to like something. Maisie said she thought so too. Douglas straightened and spoke to all of them and said that the hotel would of course be extending full hospitality for the afternoon, that the sitting area was theirs for as long as they needed, and that the dining room would be available for the family's use for dinner if they wanted, at the hotel's arrangement. Colleen said that was generous. Douglas said it was the minimum, actually, and left it at that. He turned to Christine, who had been standing 3 feet to his left, with the controlled expression of a person absorbing something difficult. He did not say anything to her publicly. He simply looked at her for one moment in a particular way, and then he asked her to join him when she had a moment, and walked back toward the corridor. Christine followed. The bellman who had drifted toward the sitting area during the earlier exchange came forward now. His name was Arthur, and he had worked at the Aldercroft Grand for 11 years, which was long enough to have watched the lobby do versions of this before. He brought a tray with a pot of actual coffee and small cups, and a plate of the shortbread cookies the hotel served in the executive lounge. He set it on the low table in front of Russell without any fanfare. He told Russell he was glad he had stayed put. Russell said he had been raised not to give up a warm seat by a fire on a cold afternoon without a very good reason. Arthur said that was wise and he meant it. He looked at Maisie and asked whether she would like something. Maisie said she was all right, that she had crackers in her backpack, and then she thought about it and said she would take one of the shortbread cookies if that was okay. Arthur said it was more than okay, and put 3 on a small plate and set it beside her. Owen poured his father a cup of coffee and handed it over, and then poured one for himself, and they sat together by the fire, the two of them, in the way of people who have spent enough years in proximity to be comfortable without filling all the space. Outside the tall windows, the light over Hartford had gone to the flat pewter of a late October afternoon. The street beyond the revolving door was full of the particular motion of a city managing its business, people in coats, taxis at angles, pigeons working the sidewalk methodically. Russell held his coffee cup and looked toward the window. He said Owen had not needed to come all the way from Bridgeport for this. Owen said he was aware of that. Russell said he had managed things for 68 years, and had managed them more or less satisfactorily. Owen said he knew that too. Russell was quiet for a moment. He watched Maisie reach for a second shortbread cookie, with the careful deliberation of a child who does not want to appear greedy, but has decided the situation merits it. He said, without looking at Owen, that it was something, watching your son grow into the kind of man who drives an hour and a half without asking why. Owen did not answer immediately. He watched a couple cross the lobby toward the elevator, trailing luggage, not looking at anything except where they were going. He told his father he had come because Maisie liked her grandfather, and it seemed like a reasonable Thursday. Russell made a small sound that was not quite a laugh and was not quite not one. Colleen came back from wherever she had gone to look at her phone and settled into the remaining chair, and looked at the three of them, and said it was a strange afternoon. Owen said it was. Maisie said, it was actually pretty good because of the cookies, and also because the carpet in the sitting area had a pattern of leaves in it that she had been trying to count. Nobody asked her how many she had gotten to. She told them anyway. 2 weeks later, Owen received a letter from the office of the Aldercroft Grand's parent company, a hospitality group that managed 11 properties across the Northeast. The letter was signed by the company's vice president of guest experience, a woman named Eleanor Hess, and it described a new internal initiative called the Dignity Standard, which the company would be implementing across all 11 properties beginning in January. The initiative required all guest-facing staff to complete recertified training on equitable service with particular emphasis on the treatment of guests who did not conform to a property's typical demographic profile. The training had been developed, the letter noted, in response to a specific incident at the Hartford property, and in consultation with the hotel's general manager. The letter thanked Owen by name. It did not promise anything he had not asked for. It simply acknowledged, in plain language, that something wrong had occurred, that it had been witnessed by a child, and that a child watching her grandfather be quietly diminished in a lobby fireplace was not an event a company with standards could simply correct internally and move on from without saying so out loud. Owen read the letter twice. He folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept things that mattered. Then he drove Maisie to school, and came back and made coffee and went to work. He did not think of himself as someone who had done something significant. He thought of himself as someone who had driven to Hartford on a Thursday, sat by a fire, and not moved when the room suggested he should. Maisie thought of him as someone who had driven to Hartford on a Thursday, and let her have 3 cookies, and sat next to Grandpa so Grandpa wasn't sitting alone. She was not wrong. Neither was he. The two things were the same thing, looked at from different heights. There is a particular kind of courage that does not announce itself, that does not ask for an audience, that simply plants its feet and stays. Most lobbies are not designed to accommodate it. Most lobbies, in the end, have to make room for it anyway.